In this video, I'm going to be philosophizing on healthy psychological functioning regarding reasoning, component parts, and processes. We can develop healthy psychological functioning engaging meaningful reasoning that connects the meaningful utterances of thought from the prior existing internalization of inputs from our sensors to the external surroundings in which we're absorbing meaningful information, and that we're internalizing that information within our introspections of the world within, and engaging in the voluntary output of meaningful information in association with our direct perception that we're always perceiving component parts and processes of what is a seemingly unified experience, yet there are many components in which we tend to focus more on the specific component parts and form associations between B and D and X, yet don't necessarily know, may think we know, the truth, and engage truth-seeking through reasoning. Truth-seeking processes that we can develop from filling the gaps in meaningful information, not so much from going with what somebody else has stated it to be, because we don't necessarily have good grounds to establish psychological truth of existence regarding its subjective objective relationships that develop our understanding of knowledge. It's always subjective and bound to learning processes in association with what we're perceiving, direct in association with our subjectivity. And so we have to develop our own inferences, and our inferences that are creative allowance, meaning interpretations to fill in those gaps with a different degree of objectivity, functionality, and meaningfulness. And it's the objective, functional, and meaningful properties that we can allowance the instantiation and then substantiation of meaningful truths of existence. Regarding the objective, functional, and meaningful criteria that are operating in association with certain component parts that we're putting together within our meaningful utterances of thought within our own self-conducted learning, which can allowance multifunctionality within our perception, action, and or behavior to be able to develop more meaningful meaning interpretations through the criteria of the objective, functional, and meaningful. And I want to make sure there's a clear distinction when I'm talking about multifunctionality of perception, action, or behavior. I'm not talking about the meaningful criteria that constitutes the aspects of truth, because functional properties of truth are not the same as the multifunctionalities of perception, action, and or behavior. This is from a functionalist perspective, and when we're talking about the practicality of implementing truth, when we're trying to assess the validity, psychological, true, and meaningful criteria, just simplifying it to functional is good enough and necessary conditions to be able to constitute meaningful truths. In many ways, this is very similar to, and meaningfully so, to this process of breaking things down to component parts and processes that are easier to access knowledge as we can ingest it more meaningfully and develop more nonlinear connections that are creative and can allowance much more easier access to knowledge regarding meaning interpretations that are both direct and indirect in association to what we're engaging in direct perception. That's all I want to say for this video. Hope you have an awesome one and keep developing those episodes.